The year-old war in Ukraine has had far-reaching impacts on energy markets over the past year, redrawing the global map of oil and gas flows and creating a new boom market for U.S. producers. New data from the U.S. government showed that America exported a record 11.1 million barrels of oil and refined products per day in February. That is more than the total output of either Saudi Arabia or Russia. After decades spent building its reputation as a credible supplier, Russia's decision to invade a neighbor and weaponize its leading export has altered consumption patterns and hobbled future production. This has created a window of opportunity for America. After decades of concerns over energy dependence, it is safe to say that the U.S. is finally on its way back to becoming the world's biggest player in the energy sector. America has a long and complex history when it comes to energy dominance and decline. The U.S. and the Russian Empire were the world's largest oil producers in the 1900s. By the 1920s, the United States was the world's largest producer of oil, and this dominance continued through World War II, during which the United States was responsible for producing almost all of the oil consumed by Allied forces. But after the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries was formed in 1960 to coordinate the policies of oil-producing countries, the United States' dominance in the global energy market began to decline in the 1970s, especially after the oil embargo in 1973. In contrast, the Soviet Union's dominance in the energy sector continued to grow throughout the Cold War, as the country became a major supplier of natural gas to Europe. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union was the world's largest producer of natural gas and the second largest producer of oil, after Saudi Arabia. This was at a time when America's dependence on foreign oil was continuing to grow, reaching a peak in the early 2000s, when the country was importing over 60% of its oil. But in the past 2 decades, the United States has experienced a resurgence in energy dominance, driven largely by the growth of shale oil and gas production. Advances in technology allowed companies to extract oil and gas from shale rock formations, which had previously been considered too difficult and expensive to access. This led to a boom in domestic oil and gas production, with the United States becoming the world's largest producer of oil and gas by 2018, and Russia coming in second place. Even after 100 years of wars and revolutions, the US and Russia were still the 2 biggest players in the energy sector. But all that changed when Russia invaded Ukraine. The global energy supply chains have now shifted drastically, paving the way for the US to come out at the top as the world's biggest energy exporting nation. Prior to the invasion, Europe had imported 4.5 million barrels of oil per day from Russia in 2021, and that is 34% of Europe's total oil imports. Following the invasion and when Russian oil was sanctioned, and the European Union could no longer accept Moscow's seaborne cargoes, U.S. exporters and others scrambled to divert cargoes of liquefied natural gas from Asia to Europe. Countries such as Germany that had relied on low-cost Russian gas to meet their economic needs raced to build new LNG import infrastructure to prepare for a future free from Moscow's energy resources. By now, Europe has shown that it can live without Russian oil and gas, reducing Russian imports to below 20% of total consumption. The EU primarily has the United States to thank for the flexibility to achieve that rapid transition without throwing the continent's economy into chaos. The US's ability to export crude oil, refined goods, and LNG has been crucial to the success of Europe's transition away from Russian energy, which is almost complete. In 2022 compared to 2021, US LNG shipments to European ports doubled, making up more than half of Europe's LNG imports. These shipments made the United States the largest LNG exporter in the world and assisted the European region in surviving a 54% decline in gas shipments. The story for oil is similar. U.S. crude exports to Europe increased roughly 70% from the previous year, reaching 1.75 million barrels daily. that helped Europe reduce its dependence on Russian oil. This dramatic rewiring of the global oil and gas markets would not have been possible if America had not built itself into an energy powerhouse during the last 15 years. According to Daniel Pickering, the chief investment officer at Pickering Energy Partners, the price of natural gas and oil now is lower than where it was before the Russian invasion. There's a global LNG boom that has become much more apparent and visible to the market, and all of this has changed where Russian oil moves to. India and China are now the biggest importers of Russia's crude oil, and this goes on to show that the US is transforming the global energy sector and supply chains. One of the most important lessons that can be learned during a time of war is on energy security. In this context, America's energy abundance helped Europe from falling into chaos. Even though energy prices have fallen, it is not the time to be complacent, as supply constraints remain a genuine concern in the present day. Energy supplies are a global commodity, and with it comes the issues of supply and demand. Moscow confirmed a production decrease of 500,000 barrels per day that will come into effect soon. The price of oil will go up if those barrels are removed from circulation. Concerns have also been raised about the effects of years of underinvestment by oil and gas companies in the United States on supply. Goldman Sachs is cautioning clients about probable shortages of commodities later this year, particularly in the energy sector where Brent is expected to rise to $105 per barrel and LNG to $55 per million BTU. That poses an enormous challenge to the global economy, which is still coping with high inflation and has not seen demand fully return to pre-pandemic levels. Over the past year, the significance of America's immense energy resources has gained prominence on the global stage as a balancing influence for markets abruptly shaken by geopolitical instability. It's why the previous administration pursued an energy dominance agenda to protect Americans from shocks to the energy market and help address global supply crises when they arise. On the other hand, the Biden administration is often criticized for having greener goals, as it frustrates U.S. energy security goals. Biden's policies to make the U.S. an energy-independent nation will pay off in the long run. Yet in the immediate future, where war and dissent are imminent, America and the world will continue to depend on oil and gas to run their economies. Until tanks run on solar power, petroleum will continue to define energy security, and energy security is national security. While a transition to a lower carbon economy is underway, it may take decades to achieve. In the meantime, America has the ability to maintain its status as an energy superpower capable of rescuing its allies, or else the entire global energy market could collapse.